The Korean Empire was an independent country till 1910 when the Japanese took over, and in 1945 the Americans liberated the South and the Soviets liberated the North from Japanese occupation. But after that, both sides imposed their own forms of government on the liberated areas. South became a capitalist dictatorship backed by the US, and North became a communist dictatorship backed by the USSR. Now, the thing is, the leaders of these two states did not get along well. And in June 1950, with the USSR's green signal, North Korea invaded the South. And because they outnumbered the Southern forces, they managed to very quickly occupy most of the country. Now, the US wanted to get involved, but they also wanted to use a false facade. Because if they got involved directly, it wouldn't send a good message to the USSR. Of course, the US wanted to go there to stop communism from spreading, but they couldn't say that openly. So instead, they decided to use the UN forces for the mission under the pretext of stopping war. Now, for this, they needed to pass a resolution, and they managed to pass it also. Why? Because even though USSR could have vetoed the session, it wasn't even there in the session. They were boycotting it because there was debate going on whether the China's communist regime should be recognized or not. Now, 16 countries composed the UN Army for intervention, while there were another 5 countries that provided non-combat medical support. But despite all this, the American influence was clearly visible in this expedition. Most of the troops were American, and even the commander in chief, General Douglas MacArthur, was American. Now, by September, the joint UN South Korean forces managed to drive the North Koreans beyond the 38th parallel. And in case you don't know, 38th parallel was the border between North and South Korea. Now, once this was done, their original objective was completed. But then General MacArthur decided to, go further. They pushed the North Koreans all the way towards the border with China, and then China ended up joining the war on North Korea's side. After this, the joint Chinese and North Korean forces then began advancing south, and they pushed the joint UN and South Korean forces beyond the 38th parallel. So now they were already in South Korea. And the thing is, Chinese forces were more used to the climate and landscape compared to the UN troops, and they had been armed by the Soviets as well, so they performed quite well. And at this point, MacArthur wanted to attack China directly, and he even considered, nuking it. But given that the USSR also had nuclear weapons by this point, Truman didn't agree with MacArthur and eventually sacked him and brought him home in April 1951. And General Omar Bradley would later say that MacArthur wanted to start a wrong war with the wrong enemy at the wrong place. In June 1951, the joint UN South Korean forces managed to push the joint Chinese North Korean forces beyond the 38th parallel, and peace talks began. But the thing is, both sides often held long discussions without any proper outcome, to the point the first round of talks failed. And because of this, things continued like this. The talks were going on, but fighting didn't stop till 1953. In 1953, what happened was that Truman was replaced by Eisenhower, who wanted to end the war. And the same year, Stalin also died, and the Chinese morale was lowered by the fact that the new leadership in Moscow also wanted to end the war. So, in the end, armistice was signed and the war practically ended. What was previously known as the 38th parallel wasn't the border of the South and North Korea anymore. Instead, a demilitarized zone, the DMZ, was created. You can see it on this map. And That's it. Officially, no peace treaty has been signed to this day. So technically, South Korea and North Korea are still at war, but practically, fighting stopped once the armistice was signed. Now, coming to our fundamental question, was communism successfully contained by the Americans? So, there are two answers, and it depends on how you justify your answer, okay? You can argue that yes, it was because South Korea was saved, and message was sent to the USSR that US could in fact stand up to communism. It's not that they couldn't, they could. And you can also argue no, because containment showed its limits. North Korea stayed communist. And not only that, but North Korea eventually managed to get nuclear weapons with the help of USSR, China, and allegedly Pakistan, according to some sources. And in 2006, they conducted their first nuclear test. And because of this, even today, US troops are stationed in South Korea to protect South Korea. Because South does not have nuclear weapons, while the North does, giving it a clear advantage. So, once again, your answer depends on how you justify and how you word it, most importantly. Thank you for watching.